So, Michael Laverty, MotoGP, BT Sport pundit, Moto3 team owner, academy owner. What's wrong with you? Are you mad?
I did sometimes wonder that myself this year. Was it taking on a little bit too much? And in some ways I had. It was just I was running from pillar to post at stages in the season when I couldn't get on top of things. But I guess year one was always going to be that way, where you feel like you're just always plugging holes, trying to get on top of the next thing. But even you speak to team managers who are years down the line and they say the same. You just lose all your free time, so that's a goner now. So any personal time you used to have that was for fun this year just got totally engulfed, and it was all in team stuff and work related. But at the end of the day, that's what I've signed up for, so you got to push on through it. And yeah, we're getting there. We're getting on top of it now.
But when you were sort of planning to do a Moto3 team and an academy, when you talk to people about doing this, you must have spoken to Chaz and Eugene. Did they say, "Don't Stu, you can't do all that at once because everything will come crashing down around your ears because it's just too much to do all at once"?
Yeah, a few people did. A few people were like, "What are you doing? That's too much. You'll not be able to make everything work." And I did have to cut some elements off it during the season because I realised that some elements were suffering. So I had took on in the Spanish Championship the Moto2 campaign, and mid-season we realised 5 bikes in the garage down there with a team that was under finance. We didn't have much budget for the Spanish Championship, but that was actually a last minute addition. So I was originally only ever going to do mini bikes in the UK, British Talent Cup, and the GP team. But then a few things changed, and obviously the age rules changing. So the fact that we can't have a rider in Moto3 Grand Prix until they're 18. So I started thinking the original setup of the academy was mini bikes from 10 to 12 years old. But then I was like, well, that's a long time to groom them and prepare them for 18-year-olds. So I had to shift the thinking towards actually British Talent Cup, European Talent Cup. So getting the riders when they're, say, 14 and spending 4 years preparing them for GPs was a more realistic option. So then myself and Simon Marsh from Vision Track thought, you know what, we'll push forward immediately in year one, because the KRP team were down in Spain. They were the landing pad for the British riders, and Carter Brown and Johnny Garness rode for Mark Keane the year before. Mark was stopping his team in Spain, so there was no longer a British presence. So it was like, right, who's going to fill the void? So we'll do it. And to be honest, that was the one that caught me out. I didn't quite have the budget. I didn't quite have the staff and the resources, but I thought, you know what, it starts in May. I'll get on top of it. It's a we start in the GPs in February. We start in March for the British Talent Cup. It gives me a couple of months, but I arrived at the first test and it was a bit chaotic. And the first few rounds were chaotic, to be honest. And we had 5 bikes. We had 2 Moto2s, we had a 600 super stock, and then we had 2 European Talent Cup bikes, and it was mental. So I got to the midpoint of the season, and then I said, you know what, we have to stop the Moto2. We were on a Honda engine with a Spirit chassis, so it was a British chassis, British manufacturer backing us. But the class, I thought actually there'd still be quite a few Hondas out there, but everyone had switched to Triumph, so we were already on the back foot, and it was like you were on a hiding to nothing. So although the print in principle it was going to be that next step after Moto3 to have a Moto2 team, but we just weren't quite ready. So I had to stop the bigger bike and Moto2 category in Spain and just focused on the European Talent Cup and cut it back to 3 riders. And as soon as I'd done that, we started getting success with podiums with Casey O'Gorman. We had race wins in the last 2 rounds, and then you realize actually the importance of not stretching yourself too thin, or too far. So that was a big lesson there. But yeah, like back to your original question, I kept saying yes to everything, and that was a bit of a failure on my point. You have to realize when you're going to be extended too far. So I couldn't please everyone, and I wasn't going to. So I had to make a few tough decisions in the summer. And by cutting it back, then we gained success in the Spanish Championship. At least we were having success in the British Talent Cup, despite having 5 riders in that team. But it was a little bit easier in British Talent Cup. The level's not as high as in Spain. So, and they were all 5 riders in British Talent Cup were all in the one class, whereas stretching across 2 classes in Spain was tough. So yeah, I learnt my lesson quick there in terms of the financial drain it is down there when you're crashing Moto2 bikes and everything. It was quite a strain on our resources, on our finances, on me personally, because in Spain I was truck driver, parts manager, team manager, trying to do a little bit of everything because I didn't have the budget to employ people. And I was lucky in a way because Macaulay Webb, who's one of my chief mechanics in the GP team. He's Honda trained. He was with Sean Muir and BMW World Superbikes. So despite being young, he's got a lot of experience. And he was a mechanic for me in the Spanish team. And all of a sudden, I seen from his natural intuition and what needed doing. I was like, he's a perfect team coordinator / team manager, and I moved him into that role, and that took so much pressure off me. And he's been a godsend. So he just does so much without having to be told to do it. So I can just delegate to him, and he pretty much ended up running that team at the end of the year. So it's good when you find key people that make those differences in your life and give you back some free time and take the pressure off you. So yeah, I think that's been my biggest thing in year one, learning to delegate, not to micromanage, and let people grow into their roles, and then just take a bit of pressure off me.
You've appeared to have found a handful of really good youngsters in your first go, and we've seen academies with name riders that are come and go and have never really done anything. You've found at least 3 potentially world-class riders in your first go. Is that not just showing off?
I'm fortunate, I will admit. So the timing is right for us from a UK perspective. In some ways, it's a shame the age change is actually going to hurt us, because the way I look at it now is, if we had been able to bring Casey O'Gorman, for example, up to Grand Prix at 16, he would have been ready. So he's going to have to stay another year in the European Talent Cup, when the way he had trained and fair play to his father, he put the effort in the younger years with Casey to get him to Spain, and to make sure he'd done the same groundwork as his Spanish and Italian counterparts were doing. So the same with Johnny Garnes, and they're ready to go now at 14, 15, whereas that hasn't been the case in recent years. So Scott Ogden's a little bit older, but he came through the British Talent Cup and the Spanish system as well. So I've been keeping an eye on it for years, and there has been a few riders that are starting to make parallels with the Spanish riders. So we did look into it a little bit with having Casey, Johnny, Scott, Josh already coming through that Spanish system, and we've sort of jumped in, taken them. They've already done a little bit of the hard work. So yeah, we can't take too much credit for their early years, because they've done it themselves. But realizing then that actually having the next steps on the ladder is the important bit. So we're working to create the road to MotoGP. So from the FIM Mini GP series into British Talent Cup, into European Talent Cup, then Junior World Championship, then Moto3 Grand Prix, and we'll have bikes in each one of those series. So it makes the path quite clear, and then we find the riders at say 14 and take them onwards. So the mini bikes in the UK is quite healthy, with 2 series, with the FAB Championship and the BMB. But I was so stretched this year, I didn't have a proper fingerprint on it. So I had some riders I was supporting, but I had no time in my schedule to even be there. Never got to a single mini bike race. So actually, I've been speaking with Danny Webb lately, he's running his GP camps, and he's doing a good job, hands on with the kids, really sees what's going on. So I thought, you know what, I'll work with Danny a little bit, let him be on the ground, and he'll work with the kids that are in the mini bikes from say 10 to 14, and then we'll sort of take them from British Talent Cup onwards. So it relieves me a little bit of the pressure of I can't be on site, I can't watch them, I can't see them, I can't get to know them, whereas Danny he's there, and he completely knows what he's looking at. So it's good to bring another rider in there who's been through the Spanish system. Danny knows what it takes, and he's been down there in CEV a lot. So yeah, I think that will help us actually alleviate a little bit of pressure for the junior ranks. Let him train the mini bike kids, then we'll take them from say British Talent Cup onwards. So yeah, we've been lucky, I got to say, and to get 1-2 in our first year in the British Talent Cup, to have multiple race wins with Johnny Garnes, to have the 1-2 or the joint finish with Carter Brown and Johnny at Donington was quite special. To win those last 2 ETC races with Casey. And then the GP team, actually, when you think back to the early rounds with Scott being top Honda at Jerez, being in there battling, getting our front row in Motegi, it's been a really good rookie season. Scott, a little bit disappointed in how his results tailed off, but Scott put so much pressure on himself. He wanted results that were above our expectations as a team right from day one. So then it became tough for him whenever he wasn't getting those results. He was feeling like he was going home disappointed every weekend, but he'll bounce back in year 2. I'm confident of that. So yeah, as an academy as such, that's one thing I need to sort of fix a little bit next year. We're an academy, but an academy as such should be training and developing the kids away from it, but I've been so busy just getting the teams and infrastructures and actually working as 3 independent team units, getting those off the ground this year, that actually the training behind the scenes has somewhat disappeared or not really been there. But we set up our workshop in Barcelona for the GP and team and the Spanish team, so we'll get some mini bikes and training bikes down there and start to build some development camps in the winter. So that was always a plan when we set this up, but we just haven't been able to achieve it in year 1. But for year 2, we're going to address that.
You've achieved some, well, quite amazing results really in Moto3 for your rookie season. There's been some twonks in this country on the, as you have the keyboard warriors. Well, they should have been doing this and this, and they've got. And look at the 10-year-olds that are in that. You know, you must be really pleased and maybe a little surprised.
With honestly,
just how well you've got on.
Yes, especially in Grand Prix, you can't underestimate the level of the series there. You're battling against teams who've been in that series for years, riders with pedigree. So to come in there and be as competitive as we were, again, as I mentioned with Scott, it was trying to adjust his expectation, because we were at Portimao at the first preseason test, and Scott was putting laps in at will without a tow by himself, and we were top 3, top 5 pace. And I remember speaking to Taylor and Simon there at the test and going, are we allowed to get ahead of ourselves here? But we kept our feet on the ground, and when it got racing, it was a little bit tougher, but Scott done really well in those early rounds. And unfortunately for him, because he done so well at the start, the little bit of dip in form, a few crashes just ahead of the summer break, and it was a bit of a tougher second part of the season for him. But yeah, there's a lot of learning to do in year 1, so it was above my expectation in the early rounds, and I completely thought if we go there and score points in year 1, at any point we've done well. But for Scott to be a regular Q2 qualifier, to score points, to be front row of the grid in Motegi, to be top Honda in Jerez, we had a lot of good highlights in year 1. Obviously, in terms of the sponsor, they want the team to be at the front, and we have to be patient. We will get there. We're a rookie team with rookie riders this year, so we'll build into it in year 2. Josh was the opposite side. He's that little bit younger than Scott, a little bit less experienced, possibly stepped up a year earlier than he would have wanted to ideally. But with the age limit change of Scott, if Josh hadn't come up this year, he wouldn't have been able to ride next season, because he'd had to wait until he's 18 the year after. So he's slightly grandfathered in terms of his age for next year. So he gets the old rules, and he's able to ride as a 17-year-old next year. So yeah, from that point of view, Josh, I think, was in at the deep end. But again, he had been racing in Spain, and he'd been battling with, I remember actually the weekend I signed the contract with Josh, he was battling in Misano with Diogo Moreira, and then you see Moreira up in the front row of the grid. So Josh was looking at riders that he had raced with in Spain and thinking, I should be there. But again, year 1, you have to adjust those expectations. He had to learn how to ride the Honda. And I got to say, full credit to Josh. He really knuckled down, trimmed down on his weight. He's only a young kid and hadn't got a lot of weight on him, so he had to really work hard just to get down to the weight to help the power to weight ratio and acceleration off the corners. And second part of the season, he was getting closer all the time. His gaps to the front were so much closer, and getting closer to the Q2 spot. So yeah, I think he can be very proud of his first season. So yeah, I think that, as you mentioned, the keyboard warriors, that's a big thing, because the young lads read Instagram posts and Facebook posts and Twitter, and they see all that, and they immediately think, oh, the world don't think we're doing good enough yet. And I'm like, don't forget about what people say on social media. It's a good tool for promoting your sponsors, promoting yourself, but actually the mental health aspect is very much rife in racing. People are talking about it now, but actually for these young kids getting lambasted when they crash or have a bad result, and people absolutely hammering them, it's not fair. But obviously you're never going to fix that overnight, and I feel for them having to read it. Obviously social media wasn't a thing in my earlier years, but there was a period when I would read the negative comment, and it does cut through a little bit. You know, you do develop a thicker skin as you get older, but for 16, 17, 18-year-olds reading negative comments every weekend when they're giving it their best, it's tough. So yeah, managing that's not easy, and sometimes wish they would switch off from social media, but it's a key part of life these days. So it's not. I know Keenan Sofwally, he mandates it. He made Jan come off social media. I think Dennis is on you as well, because it was having an effect on them. So yeah, it's a big part of it now, and something that you have to factor in, that they're going to read it, they're going to take these negative comments on board, and hopefully it doesn't seep through the skin a little bit, as they say.
I mean, what when you're watching your guys, having never been a Moto 3 rider, what do you say? I mean, what do you say to them? Because I've never been a rider, I mean, at all, so I can't tell anybody to do anything. But you've been a super sport rider, a superbike rider. You've obviously ridden in MotoGP. How do you go about saying this needs to be done here, this needs to be done there, or do you leave it to Taylor, or does Chaz come and have a look and you all three superbike riders together say, "Out a Moto 3 bike"?
Honestly, this year I don't get involved on that side at all, because I remember doing it in the past for John McPhee, going out trackside whenever he was riding with the British Talent team back in what year was that? 2017 maybe. And we were out at Catalonia, and I was watching trackside and going, you know what, I do this job for Chaz, and I can bring back useful information because I've rode superbikes. I understand how the tires work, how the suspension works, how the electronics work, and I could bring back useful data. But whenever I watch Moto 3 out there, I was like, all the bikes look the same. Their wheels in line, they're so rigid, they change direction fast. Everyone rides a fairly similar line. That's about the only pointer you could maybe bring, someone using a different gear pattern or shifting a little bit sooner or slightly different entry line. But there wasn't a lot. So whenever I was at the preseason tests earlier in the year, and I went out trackside and watched it, I didn't have a lot to bring back. So I just left that to Taylor, and he does go out trackside and videos a little bit with the camera and tries to bring back some feedback to the boys. But yeah, it's a different thing, because Moto 3, nearly all the complaints from the riders are strategy, and that's all about being in pit lane, finding a group to follow. So it's all about the slipstream and the tow. So it's not the way you come into the pit box and you go through things with your crew chief and work on tire life or the ultimate setting of the bike for speed. The riders never really seem to complain about the setup of the bike much. It's always about strategy, finding the slipstream, finding the tow. So it's a different ball game. And for me, actually, I can't get my head around it. It frustrates me that that's all my riders want to do is look for a tow. I'm like, just go and ride your bike. Go get out there, understand how to ride it faster. But the Moto 3 class is strange that way, and it's actually got worse over recent years. And I do put it down to the fact that it's such a young field. So you think back to your 125 days, and you had your Lucio Cecchinellos, your Nobueiras, your older experienced guys who actually taught the younger guys a more mature way of riding, whereas now the kids all come in and they're whatever 17, 18. Now it's going to be 18 and above, but they're so young and they know that way of working, and they know that there's half a second to a second to be found from a toe, and that's all they focus on. So yeah, in some ways I'd love to see something change in the class, but I don't know how you eradicate the need for the slipstream with the low horsepower bikes.
Well, I mean, it was as one thing I was going to ask you is, obviously, I mean, it's getting. Well, it's been dangerous for some time. It's getting ridiculous, and
Yeah.
the same's happening. The same's happening in Super Sport 300. You've got 40 children all riding around behind each other at 140 miles an hour, and it only takes one thing to go wrong, as we've seen too often. Well, I mean, have Dorna. I know it's very easy to say, have Dorna got to do something about this, but have Dorna got to do something about this?
If there was an easy fix, I know there's been some suggestions out there. I like the Jurgen van der Gerberg one of changing the gearbox internal ratios to make the slipstream less beneficial, but I don't see an easy fix other than giving them more horsepower to separate the better riders. So at the minute, you can have a rider who's maybe 1 second off the pace and he can get in the group and he can hang there because of the draft in Moto 3, and similar with Super Sport 300 because they're all slow motorcycles, heavy motorcycles, but they're all in big groups then and benefiting from the draft. And that's always the worry. So when you crash in a group and you get collected, that's something even with the modern safety equipment and the airbags, it can't negate if you get struck by another bike. It was always a worry myself when I race, but you look at the small bike classes now and it's scary. So yeah, I do think it's a case of the better riders can't actually make as much of a difference now as they used to be able to, for whatever reason, the way the class has developed, and it is harder to step out from the pack, so it always ends up a group race. But how do you fix it? I don't know. There's no. I've seen the suggestion for more CC, more torque, more horsepower. Maybe that would be something that it would give you an ability to punch off the corners, to accelerate away. Whereas at the minute, it is very much line astern, slipstream, drafting. But yeah, it's scary to watch. I love the all action racing, but at the same time, whenever I've got young riders out there that I'm invested in, that I've got a relationship with, it makes me very nervous. And the same with John McPhee, and he obviously I've been his personal manager and friend for a lot of years, and watching in the later years he's won races, but I think he's a quality rider, but the nature of riding in the class now, it isn't the best rider who can go out there and set their bike up and learn how to ride by themselves and pull out. They can't make such a difference. So now it's all about just aggression and dive bombing and slipstreaming. So it is a very different style of riding.
What expectations do you have for your team, not only for 2023, but going forwards, if you have any expectations?
Yeah, I don't actually, I've sort of got a plan in place. I would love to have a Moto2 team in the future so that we do fill all those steps on the ladder, all the way from the British Talent Cup right the way through to preparing the next MotoGP rider. So I do think, I'm happy that Rory Skinner's jumped on the American racing team. So that gives us a platform for another British rider coming through the Superbike route, because you look at our last MotoGP rider, Cal Crutchlow, came the Superbike route, but the potential there to land in Moto2 directly out of Moto3, it hasn't been there for the UK, and I think that's where Bradley Ray would have went, where Tom McKenzie would have went, where Kyle Reid would have went, where all those riders who came through the Red Bull rookies and Moto3 system, they didn't have somewhere. So I'd like to be the person who creates the path. That's my ultimate goal. Obviously, it's expensive to run Moto2, especially when you're trying to run a Moto3 team, and the junior ranks as well. They're the harder ones to finance. It's more easy to sell to sponsors for GPs because you've got a sellable product, but no one really sees what goes on in the CV Championship. The junior GPs, the financial drain, I really very little in terms of income support sponsor wise there. So selling that one, because it is such an important step on the ladder, that's going to be a key for me to creating longevity out of this whole structure I'm trying to build. So yeah, near-term goals obviously is to try and get Scott back to the form we started last year with, and show his potential next year, getting top 10s, top 5s, and ultimately get on the podium. And Josh, similar, start getting the top 10s next year. So that would be really nice, getting into the points next year for Josh, and getting into the top 10 is my hope for him. In the junior ranks, obviously we had a success with the winning the British Talent Cup, or 1-2 in the championship in year one. So I'm not actually focused too much on the success in those series. We'll work those as the feeder system. A little bit more success in Spain. That was nice. It sort of properly established ourselves when we won the last 2 rounds. So it did allow, we made a name for ourselves, made our presence felt down there. Whereas I know when you're competing against Monlau and Aspar and all the established teams, not easy to get a foot in there in year one, and we managed to do that. So yeah, just it's always easier year two, a bit of stability, and just improve the areas we didn't get right in year one, and then long term, like I say, trying to get the foothold into Moto2, and then creating a sustainable team that's less of a financial and time drain on me personally, that I can actually step back a little bit and just sort of coordinate, conduct, and have good people in there running it, and good sponsors supporting it, and giving the riders from the UK, and we'll probably have to look outside the UK, because the UK market, they can get a good bang for their buck in BSB, and the World Superbike platforms always obviously attractive for them. So yeah, a lot of the bigger sponsors in the MotoGP paddock are Asia or outside. So I did have some interest from the Asian market, but at the minute I wanted to keep the team for the UK riders as such, but we may have to diversify a little bit and open up their avenues. Depends on the financial climate in the future. You just, it's difficult. I'm trying to keep it all UK and Ireland so far, but it's not going to be easy to do that forever.
Well, I mean, you've got your Vision Track puffer jacket on. I mean, this must be costing a small fortune somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Have you had to, and tell me to clear off if it's being too personal, have you had to remortgage the house and sell Jodie's kidneys and put your parents up for sale and all that stuff, or have you managed to do it without it costing you your own shirt?
No. I've had to put quite a substantial amount of my own money in to get it off the ground. I knew year one was going to be expensive whenever you're purchasing vans and trucks and bikes and garage equipment and toolboxes and whatever, all the equipment you need to run it. It's expensive in year one. I'm very lucky to have Vision Track and Simon Marsh behind me in the project, and to have a title sponsor in the current climate post COVID, it's difficult. It's really hard. So I'm so thankful for their support. I do have some other good partners as well, but it's not easy to make it, to balance the books at the end of the year without me having to cough up a substantial amount. So I'm hoping in the future, if I can attract more sponsorship, it'll cost me less. That's the ultimate goal, because everyone tells me in business that you pay yourself first, whereas I obviously can't afford to pay myself out of the team, but I do the most work time-wise. So for the majority of the year, it was 7 days a week, and it was all day, every day. It was from you wake in the morning and you've got 50 emails and 20 WhatsApp messages and SMSs, and you have to attend every one of them, and it's all day long, and it's paying bills and it's paying invoices and booking travel. And so there were so many jobs that I thought, you know what, I can do it. I can't quite afford to pay someone to do it, but I can do it. But I became travel and logistics coordinator, and I was doing all that, and that's a job in itself. So managing everyone's travel schedules, booking their flights and their rental cars and hotels, and organizing all that side of it. So I need to get a bit more in the pot that I can then use my time to hopefully drum up more sponsors and support that will make our job easier. But at the minute, I was deep in the running the fundamentals of the team, the day to day, the nitty gritty, and the minutiae of actually what it takes to run a team. So I'd like to be able to have more budget, employ someone to do those, to do the accounts, to do the travel, to do everything, and then I can concentrate on promoting the team and getting more backing. So yeah, to cut a long story short, it has cost me a lot of money in year one. I'm very thankful of the support I've got from Vision Track, from Bulk Tainer, from all the sponsors who did get on board this year. And I'm just trying to drum up that little bit more interest. So the more I can get in, the more I can do for the kids and build something that really works. But yeah, it's not an easy sell at the moment if you're going to any sponsor. Everyone's cutting back with the financial reality post COVID and where we're at now, with a potential looming recession. Everyone wants to spend less rather than actually trying to get them to spend more. There's some businesses out there have done well, obviously. So it's just finding those that have actually got that extra bit of budget and want to get their brand out there. So yeah, I'm working on it.
Is Jody going to put a foot down at some point and say, "Hang on a minute, you're running 500 race teams. You've got a small child. You've got BT Sport. I'm here on the edge of Wales on my own here. Something's got to give."
I'm very lucky to have an understanding wife in Jody, and because obviously she's been through the sport all her life, raced mini bikes herself. Her brother Chaz had a career and a family invested in the sport, so she does. I'm very fortunate, and she understands, and she's doesn't give me a hard time. Actually, in the middle part of the year, she was starting to, and then she looked at my workload, and actually, I think she felt a bit of sympathy on me, so she left me alone to get through the year. But yeah, now we're at the end of the season, and I said, like, as soon as Valencia is done, I'll have so much more time at home. But since then, I've had ICMA show, I've had the NEC bike show, I've been bringing bikes back from our workshop in Barcelona to the workshop in Ireland and in the UK, and it's just been, I've been on the road all the time and going for meetings and trying to sort everyone's contracts and trying to get sponsors boxed off. So I've just haven't really stopped, and I'm looking forward to the period over Christmas when I will. There's a forced holiday over the Christmas period, but I had it last year and I really didn't want it when I was trying to get everything set up. But Spain, Italy, they just close their doors just before Christmas and don't open up until the middle of January or the second week in January. So during that period, I plan to have some proper family time, have a holiday, switch off, hopefully turn my phone off that I'm unreachable for a couple of weeks, and then get back to it in the new year. But I'm hoping. I love the BT Sport job, and actually when I go to the GPs, because I've got Taylor McKenzie there as my team manager, that's almost a holiday for me from the race team. So I arrive there on a Thursday and then hand the team over to Taylor essentially, and he takes care of everything. And then on Sunday night, I take over the reins again. So I've got the ability to feel normal over a race weekend where I can do my BT Sport job, socialize with the BT Sport team, have a few beers, and enjoy the social aspect of it, and not worry about the bills I've got to pay come Monday morning. But yeah, I love that. I love the job. I love the feeling of not having the pressures of running the team on that weekend. But then obviously you got to get back to it on Monday. So it's been a little bit hard juggling everything, family life, each team. The mini bike kids obviously felt neglected this year. That's why I've sort of moved away from the mini bikes to let hopefully Danny Webb can focus on them, because you just don't have enough time in the day to to please everyone. You learn a lot, and you learn actually the more you give, sometimes the more it's expected. So yeah, I think I need to get my own life back a little bit, because this year I planned to ride bikes. I haven't, other than one media day at Silverstone, the only time I had my leathers on all year. But just having a bit of normal life back, a bit of time for myself, being able to, now even the last 2 weekends I've been out on my trials bike. Actually, so a lie, I have been back off road on Saturday. So just doing things like that, getting some days back for myself is important for for my own sanity. But yeah, more importantly for my wife and son. So making sure I've put them first, and they're both very aware that they haven't been first this year. So I've just had to try and fit them in. And at most points of the season, I was getting back on a Monday, would get home here, fly into Heathrow in the morning, and get home here in Wales late afternoon. Tuesday would be my only day at home, and then I'd travel again on a Wednesday. So putting in 1 day a week at home. And typically in years gone by, I probably wouldn't have come home if it wasn't for Leo. So because he was there, I would make the effort to come home. And years gone by, I'd have just stayed out there, because it would have been easier than actually jumping on 2 more flights, one to get back to the UK and then one to leave again. So yeah, just managing my time is something I need to get on top of a little bit better. Delegating a little bit more, getting people to do jobs that I just, there's a budgetary constraint. So and I don't like to ask people to do things I feel I can do myself. B, I'm a little bit tight, because I think if I have to employ a driver to go and drive that van for a day, when I could do it and I can make phone calls while I'm driving. But yeah, sometimes you just do need to take the foot off the gas a little bit and let people do the work for you.
Michael, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, David. Cheers.